and welcome back to the EK-EXPO. This is our second live stream today. It's again me and Joe. You have already been used to us, and we have gathered up a nice number of questions in this short break. So we will start with a interesting one. What about fittings that would light up based on the flow? So you have might seen these showers and sinks which like turn blue or red depending on the water temperature. So what do you think about that idea? Would it be ever available in liquid cooling PCs?
I can see maybe one as a novelty, as a flow indicator that can also give you some temperature information and change color, but as a fitting, as lots and lots and lots, that would be a big restriction. For sure.
I also think that the liquid pressure required to have this glow would be so big that it will be very restrictive on the loop itself, but who knows, maybe one day we will have that one as well. A question from a viewer: what pump should be used for a 4x360 radiator setup? Well, it would also depend on the rest of the things as well. So if you can fill it up so that we know how many GP water blocks or CP water blocks would you be using, that would be helpful. And also, it also depends on the thickness of the radiator, because slim radiators are way more restrictive than the thick ones.
And that opens up another good topic, especially when it comes to planning. Is it better to have, let's say, 4 360s, but perhaps if you could fit 3 480s, then you've greatly reduced the restriction. Every time you make the coolant turn inside the radiator, it's a big difference to the restriction of the loop. So a 240 will perform better than 2 120s, for example.
We also got a question about the VRAM bridge right here, which we have it, and which is in our shop for 2 weeks, I guess, which was live for the launch of the Maximus Formula 12. We have written that a mounting system is special, and it's patent pending. So what can you tell about the mechanism itself? What is it that is special about this mounting way?
So the main claim which makes it unique is that the bridge itself engages with the fittings which it mounts on. So there's a single screw which locks it, which prevents it from coming out, but the actual mechanism which holds it on is an elliptical hole that goes over the barb, so to speak. There's an undercut on the barb, and when you just push it on and close, then it's locked on. So that's the unique feature there.
We got a question about our support. So people are asking what is going on with our support. People have been being used to getting responses really faster. This is a thing that we are getting so many tickets lately because the overall sales is bigger than before. So we are also getting more support tickets, questions, and so on. So rest assured that we are working on hiring more support people so that we can process everything much faster, so that we can go back to the way EK is actually known to have the best customer support in this business. Back to the questions from the viewers. Are we planning to make other magnitude style blocks like GPUs and RAM blocks maybe? And actually Joe has a nice sample right here next to him.
Yep.
And he will tell more about this magnitude style Threadripper block itself.
Yep. So the first step from magnitude, the immediate demand of everyone in the comments when it was released, is was the Threadripper version. And the latest generation Threadripper chips are pretty unique in the way the dies are laid out. So it wasn't such a fast exercise to get a product ready. And this is where we devoted the resources of the Magnitude project, and that was straight into the Threadripper that everyone demanded. And I think now we've delivered that, we'll have some new demands and we'll definitely respond. But we may wait for the next generations of graphics cards to come.
So what will be the main point of the new Threadripper Magnitude style CPU block? So what features will it incorporate?
So it really builds on exactly the same philosophy as the original Magnitude. It's a lot more customizable. The quality of finish is absolutely immaculate. The frame which surrounds it, milled from a much bigger solid block of aluminium this time with even more material out. And of course the same ethos towards performance continues. So we're optimizing very specifically for the latest generation Zen 2 Threadrippers, not so much the earlier ones, and targeting each die individually and manipulating the contact pressure appropriately so we get the maximum performance for the latest CPUs.
We can also mention that we will be also focusing on the flow restriction itself, because as you know, the CPU block that is already the launch for the AMD AM4 and the Intel sockets manages to bring top liquid cooling performance, while it being much more forgiving on the pumps itself.
Yeah, it's one of the things we really tried to leverage. It's quite an advanced design internally. We haven't just pushed the density of the fins or the size of the fins to the extreme. We've still been quite educated with the dimensions of the fins, and the rest of the geometry is really carefully optimized. There's lots of iterations and ideas and simulation behind every Magnitude, and we want to get it just right and not just make it restrictive for performance sake, and they perform best on balance. So we want to improve every aspect, not one.
So making denser fins, we will be just making a liquid cooling filter.
Sure.
So we have a question. Any plans that we will be doing a water filter which can be removed, cleaned, and then put back really easily into the loop? And what is your idea? Do we need something like this?
I mean, we always respond to our customers' input, and this is not regularly requested. And I think most simple loops don't really need it, but it really depends on your strategy of maintenance and coolant decisions, finishes, and I think perhaps the people who want it are not so loyal to one brand.
Yeah, I mean, also, if you want a filter, or if you need a filter, that means that you just have to flush your loop before you before you actually fill it, so that you remove all of the unwanted particles from your loop before you actually fill the loop itself. Going back to the Magnitude style blocks, here's a question about glass. So can we expect the use of glass on GPU blocks?
Possibly. It's definitely something that we're considering. It's a really nice surface finish to have, but it's not quite so flexible. We would have to commit to a high quantity, and it limits the machining and what's possible with it, because even just drilling a hole close to the edge of glass is a huge problem. And you see it often on case design. Since glass panels have been incorporated, the mounting points have to move inwards, or it's layers glued together, and that's something we can rarely do inside a block.
A question about, will we do a collaboration with Fractal Design cases?
It's not off the cards if they call us and and have a great idea, and the reverse applies if we have something that applies strictly. But at the moment, we have a strong relationship with Fractal. They're a big fan of our work, and we know our users are a big fan of their work. So we'll continue to offer products for their cases.
We have received very good support them lately when we have wanted to make our Fractal Define distro plate. We had a really nice support from them. So yes, we will look into working with them more in the future for sure. We just got a basic question which was actually covered one of our webinars yesterday, but we can repeat it again. Does loop order really matter or not? And I think that we will be hearing this question monthly because it's such an common question.
Yeah, it's a big misconception sometimes, and essentially because heat is being added at the same rate it's being removed, hopefully, if the loop's in equilibrium, that the change across the loop is not that small. So it's not that the coolant receives all of the heat and then rejects all of the heat. It's a continuous cycle. If the flow rate's high enough, it shouldn't ever cause a noticeable difference. I think the highest change in temperature across a block would be 1.5 degrees at most. We rarely get to exceed that.
We are getting a bit more technical here. So on GPUs, is it necessary to also cool the inductor coils?
No, it's not necessary. That's a fact, but it can help with suppressing vibration from the inductors. And that's mostly the reason why we include thermal pads for the inductors if we do, just to help them from resonating.
Yeah. I think that inductor coils can withstand 100 and
at least
20
yeah,
or like even more degrees Celsius. So liquid cooling them is not necessary, but we like to do them just because we can. CPU block or monoblock, what is better? So there is no real good answer to what is better. It is a preference. So what do you think about it, Joe?
Definitely, it's a design preference, and it's a planning preference. If you want to use your CPU block again, obviously a monoblock's not great, but as I touched earlier, as much coolant visible as possible is always nice. Yeah. So it's great when you can completely immerse your board and change how it looks so much. So I can see why we have big fans, but from the performance side of things, CPU blocks generally offer better performance because we can really get the mounting pressure just right.
And also, if you use a use a board block, you would be introducing more heat to the loop itself, and usually you could you could notice small changes, rises in the CPU temperatures if you are using a monoblock because you're simply adding more heat to the loop. So if you have the same loop with a CPU block and a monoblock, you will see slightly worse performance CPU-wise if you use a monoblock, but adding more radiators would bring it down to the same level. About GPU blocks, do we plan on ever making GPU blocks which would be extending on the entire length of the PCB? And we are talking here about the cold plate itself.
Cold plate.
Yeah.
Copper's not light, and to take it all the way to the end is going to add a big piece of weight, but it will look very nice from the underside. Yeah, well, it's always something we'll consider, but it's going to add a big cost and a lot of weight, so I'm not sure if that's the best way about this.
Maybe we can save this for some of the magnitude style GPU blocks, maybe. Who knows? Because really cooling the things that are on the far end of the PCB is not really necessary.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing there practically. Until you get to the VRMs, there's no voltage change, so there's no heat.
So many questions. I need to pick one of them. Nickel versus copper. We have already covered this yesterday, so that there is absolutely no performance difference if you are using bare copper or nickel-plated blocks. Preference: hard tubing or soft tubing?
Completely depends on the loop, and you can mix them. Why not? You know,
Yeah.
when it's too difficult, or you want to go in the back, or really get out of the tough spot, a little bit of soft tubing, and for the clean stuff in the front, hard tubing. Lots of my builds in the past have been a mixture, and even aesthetically, it can work really well. I had a strange mod once where the entire internals were hard tube, and the loop for no reason passed over the front of the case, and this was soft tubing.
We have a question about how to clean before filling. So how to actually prepare the loop for filling. So this is also a personal preference. So I have never ever in my life flushed radiators before filling my loop. So it was always out of the box, into the build, fill it, that's it. I have never ever in my life flushed a new radiator. If it's a used loop, I would then break down every single piece. So CPU blocks, GPU blocks, unscrew them all, wash them separately. Radiators, I would fill them with water, hot water, shake them around like 10 times, and that's my way of actually setting up for a new coolant. How do you do it, Joe?
I'd have to agree. In 100+ loops, maybe 200+ now. I've never made the time to clean a radiator apart from my very first, and I've not experienced any difference using really high quality brands. I know that they're definitely well prepared. The same for all of the other components. However, I would say changing color, that's really tricky.
Yeah.
I once wanted to go from a mixture of gray and black back to clear, and after about 4 flushes and filling the loop fully twice, still some little gray particles come back. So that's always a challenge.
We are swapping to radiators now, and we have a question. Are we ever going to do multiple ports on our radiators? And actually, we had this internal discussion already, so this would be a perfect moment for you to help us. Do you actually need additional side ports which are on the end of the radiators so that we know how to make them? Joe, what do you think? Do we really need additional end ports?
I really like simple, clean radiators, and there are certainly a few radiator brands which take the exact opposite approach.
Yeah.
And I know that we sell the most at the end of the day, so I think people like ours. However, there's potential for it, but I think with all parts of design of the loop, we have to be really careful not to disturb the majority for the sake of a vocal minority, so to speak.
So basically, let us know if you think that you need it. Of course, we will reconsider this question, but right now we don't have plans about adding additional ports to the end of the radiators. We have a question about performance. So what would give better performance? One, a 120 millimeter rad with one fan, PE, or a XE rad with one fan. So as we like to say that liquid cooling has a lot of variables, and we would have to get information also about what would be the fan speed. So if you want to run your fans at a low speed, PE would be much better. But if you want the maximum performance, you can get an XE, but then you would have to run it on a higher speed level.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of assumptions that need to be made to answer that question, but assuming the heat load of the loop is saturated, so the radiator is not big enough, and you had a PE and an XE, then I think most fan characteristics would show at the low speeds they perform exactly the same.
Yep.
But when you shift to a really high speed, then the XE would start to pull away, and the PE wouldn't be able to take advantage of the extra airflow.
So we have a feedback slash question that someone really likes the look of our workstation PCs, and he is interested in will we be supporting some of those parts inside our shop? So will he be able to buy as a standalone custom loop liquid cooled parts?
Absolutely. Yep, we have the Pro line going into the shop, so you can get the manifold, the tubing, the QDCs from this. Blocks will also come in time, but they will concentrate on workstation-oriented cards, not necessarily gaming cards.
Any plans for cross-flow radiators?
Yes, we do have plans for cross-flow radiators, and we got it into testing, and we were really happy with the results.
It is actually more than just a cross-flow radiator, but you would be hearing more on that when we actually have some products ready for launch. So this is also part of our, would we wait until the rebuild of our radiator lineup, or we should launch them as soon as possible? So this is the internal struggle that we have at the moment. What is the biggest restriction inside a loop? 90-degree fittings, CPU blocks, radiators. What is the biggest restriction?
I think the top spot would go to GPU blocks. Naturally, for the coolant to navigate its course of the block, as well as just simply getting into it, there's a lot of direction changes, a lot of changes in the cross-sectional area. In a CPU block, in a small component like that, we can really pay attention that the cross-section changes are controlled, it's not too much, and the restriction is, let's say, useful with an impingement plate, a jet plate.
Yeah.
But in a GPU block, there's so many things to navigate if we want to keep it slim. If we need to go into a bridge plate, through the terminal itself is a big restriction, and there's a lot of size changes. A 90-degree rotary, by comparison, it's not significant.
Yeah.
Although there's a direction change, the internal diameter is 10 millimeters, just like all of our fittings. So,
actually, we have a nice blog written, do 90-degree adapters impact flow? Look it up, read it, and let us know what do you think. So currently we have a question about the upcoming GPU blocks. So current GPU blocks have only one major O-ring, which is going around the whole flow path.
Sure.
But some people are like bothered with the internal pieces, where you can get air stuck between the cold plate and the plexi itself. Do we have any plans that we would be adding additional O-rings so that we could keep these places dry, so that it is not getting air stuck in these places?
Sure. So we could add an O-ring, but that would mean making this negative space even bigger to fit the O-ring around it, and we'd also need to add screws. So I think people would start getting turned off by the random screws inside a lot more so than the coolant. We try to be neat and careful with all of the screws and make the blocks look as efficient as they can in terms of design. So not wasteful with screws, and cleanly located in straight lines, and trying to keep the interior parts isolated for no performance gain seems like a bigger challenge than it is a solution. And we also need to sometimes share parts between copper and acetal products, and then your acetal product would have a screw in the middle for no reason.
Yeah.
You wouldn't even see why it was there, so it would be bizarre.
One more question about radiator thickness. So someone is asking, so if you have a really thick radiator XE, is it better to have push-pull on them? And definitely yes. Joe will also.
For sure. If you want to get the most from the PE and extract its full potential, and
XE.
XE, then high-speed fans and push-pull is the way to get the most. But it's also a really efficient radiator for low-speed fans.
Will we be adding the InWin 925 into the configurator? So if you see that we are missing something from the CLC, please email us so that we can add some of the missing cases that you would like to see inside our CLC database. Question: have you guys considered water cooling parts with displays, possibly GPU, CPU? We have covered this question in our previous live stream. So yes, definitely we will be bringing displays onto our products. We are just making sure that we are implementing them the right way, so that it is not visually too much intrusive. If there are no other hot questions, there is a long question. I am planning on using the PC 011 front distro with the X570 master. If I do that, the flow will be reversed in the monoblock. What is the recommendation? Should he just use additional fittings and just make the loop as it would be recommended, or he is good to go with the opposite flow direction?
For sure, when it comes to restriction and the flow of the loop, I think that the fittings would have a similar effect to reversing the flow. The thermal situation is a little bit different, and if you are honestly trying to get the most from it, then a CPU block in the right orientation is the absolute best for the CPU temperature. But if you're considering the whole system, you're considering aesthetics, how it's going to look, then I think running reversed flow is a small compromise to make.
I think that we will get only one or two more questions, and then we'll be again taking a short break before we have our next live stream. Question about the upcoming flow indicators. How much do they impact the flow restrictions? So are they restrictive or not? And actually, Joe will tell you more about the approach that we we had about these impellers, so that they are a bit different than what you are used to be seeing on the market at this moment.
Yep, definitely. We moved on a little bit from our earlier impellers, and they actually have quite a large hub now. Just like a fan, only the edges of the blades are used inside the flow stream, and this really helps with bleeding, so they don't get air recirculating through them. A bubble stuck inside a flow indicator can be really annoying, so we've worked to minimize that. There is a small restriction from it. There's actually a reduction in the cross-section of the liquid, just to make sure it spins reliably, and even at really low pump speeds, you still see that it's running, because it would be more annoying if it was stopping when your pump slowed down. So we need to make sure it stays spinning, but it's not a monumental restriction, not much different fittings.
So we have seen quite a few examples where you have a flow indicator, and you just have air stuck in it and spinning around for ages, and this is why we have changed the hub size of the. We will just take 2 more questions, and then we will wrap it up. We will take this one. Will the magnitude highest performance ideology be spread on all products? We have covered this, but this one we have talked about GPU blocks and RAM blocks, but now it is extending to radiators, pumps, and fans as well.
Definitely. If hypothetically, this goes everywhere, then the ethos will continue, and it will really be about quality of finish and as much exterior metal parts as possible. When we say full nickel, that means every single part comes from a machine block. Yeah, definitely.
Also, one final question, which is a big one. Any plans on quantum fans?
Yep. We'll definitely look to distinguish fans into the product lines in the coming months. But again, this is a long-term project like radiators. We can't afford to change tooling with every aesthetic tweak we decide to make. But when we have good enough grounds to make a performance improvement, to make a physical improvement in the way the product's installed, the way it's isolated, this kind of thing, and the aesthetics, then we can justify a change, and this will come to quantum.
So that would be it for this live session, but please make sure that you click on the links which you would receive right now in the chat. That is the link to our next live session, so that you don't have to leave and then come back. Just follow these links, and we will be going live with our next video within 15 minutes or such, and then we will have one more live stream about questions and basic everyday liquid cooling topics, and that would be it for this time. See you soon. Bye.
Bye.